well, what's to say that I won't die young too? My cousin died a year before, he was 29, so before his 30th. And I couldn't see a lot of my future, like what was next. And so I was like, well, what if I'm supposed to die too? You know, what if God feels that he can get more glory from my death than from my life? And I wrestled with that for a long time, not just the year after, but years after. I wrestled with, can God get enough glory from me while I'm living? Or, you know, will I die prematurely? It was nothing blocking that idea because I saw it. Like, I saw somebody die before they were 30, full of life. I don't know. I just kind of, I knew that God could. I just didn't feel like he was being mindful of me.
The Courageous Conversations Conference is so important because where else can we have these types of conversations with these types of thought leaders about these types of topics?
It is a unique and a rare opportunity to come and hear voices that have been trained in diverse places, coming together to ask these kind of critical questions in humility, in love, in conviction, and in courage.
If you're on the fence in a broader sense about any questions you have to do with the faith, this is the right place.
This is modeling for us. How do we live in a world in which there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different points of view, even in the church? And how do I navigate that and not have to compromise what I believe?
But that is exactly why all of us need to be attending the Courageous Conversations Conference, because in a world full of crucifixion, somebody needs to start having the conversation.
Where else can you come and get both perspectives from predominantly Black and brown leaders, thinkers, scholars, preachers, pastors? There's nowhere else you can go. You need to be here at the Courageous Conversations Jude 3.
Well, thank you for watching another episode of the Jude 3 Project podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Fields, the founder of the Jude 3 Project, and we're continuing our series on my book, When Faith Disappoints, The Gap Between What We Believe and What We Experience, available wherever books are sold. So definitely get your copy. We are reviewing some of the themes of the book of When Faith Disappoints in these conversations. And today I'm joined by one of my best friends, Michael Roziers. I've known Mike since 6th grade. We were neighbors.
6th grade.
He is a fellow PK. And so it's funny that our parents both lead churches, and your house was behind mine, but I think y'all moved in closer when we had been there since I was like 5, but y'all moved there when I was in the 6th grade. And then we went to the same middle school, James Weldon Johnson.
Absolutely.
So Mike, tell our audience just a little bit about who you are.
Okay. I am the best friend of Lisa. I am the baby of 3. I have 2 older siblings, and I'm an uncle. I actually don't live here I don't live here in Florida anymore. So I live in Dallas, Texas. I've been in Dallas almost 7 years now. It's crazy it's been that long. But I'm a teacher in Dallas, and I teach middle school, and I've taught almost going on 7 years in Dallas. So it's been something.
Well, I'm glad to have you on today. I'm going to pretend like I'm asking you these questions like I don't know the answers. So, I quote you in the book. I can't remember. I think it was God, he's one for the dramatics.
Yes.
Mike always says that.
Absolutely.
That God is one for the dramatics. Tell us a little bit about how you came to faith, your faith journey.
Okay. As Lisa said, I'm a PK. And so, in being a PK, I've gotten saved a lot of times. So, kind of like trying to figure out when was that moment that I really took it serious. But I would say, out of all the times that I made that confession of faith, my senior year, I was at a young adult.
And you're talking about senior year in high school?
Senior year in high school.
Yeah.
I was at, it was 2005, and I was at my best friend's church, and they had like a young adult, a young people's rally, youth rally, at the end of July. and I knew I needed to get right. I knew I wasn't right, and a lot of conviction, and I got my life right with Christ, and was, I was living for him. So it was, I would say I was very, very committed, very freshly saved. Still had the new car smell, so to speak, and just a lot of zeal. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you came to faith in a Kojic church.
Absolutely.
Because that's where Dion was attending.
Right.
But even though he still can't join in because he wasn't born in, because his parents not Kojic.
Right.
But so what was the change from the zeal? Because I've known you since 6th grade.
Yes.
Thankfully, I passed 6th grade English because of Mike, because I don't know what was happening with that season of irresponsibility, but I just kept leaving my book.
That book. Yeah,
and it was that and another book, but you only had one class, so I
can't believe you remember that, Lee.
I just was leaving the book, and you would pass the book. It was so bad.
It was bad
that his family knew I would leave the book. So even if he went home, his brother Gabe would hand me the book, or his mama and daddy would hand me the book, because it was like, hey, listen, I don't even know if Mike there, but just can you give me the book?
But we made it. We both made it through 6th grade.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what was that shift moment? Because I know that, especially in college, there was a lot of zeal. I used to make y'all come share the gospel with me at the club parking lot. So for background, and when I was in undergrad, I went through this radical space where I felt like we needed to evangelize.
Very radical. You felt like we needed to go to the highways and the hedges.
Yes. So I wanted to go because I was sheltered, I didn't understand the dangers of the hood. So I would say, let's go to Eureka Gardens, which is a very dangerous place in our city, and share the gospel in the daytime. And then at night, that wasn't enough. I wanted to go to Plush, which was a club, parking lot to share the gospel. So we spent the whole Saturday sharing the gospel. So you went through this different phase. Well, we have a lot of zeal, random stories from that club parking lot. It was just a lot happening.
A lot.
Yes. But you went through that zealous phase. When was it? What started leading to the disappointment for you?
I don't think it was right off the bat. I think because maybe it's with new Christians, God, maybe he hears and he works a little bit quicker, And so, I would pray, and I would have those times where I would journal, and I was kind of like on a believer's voice kind of victory kind of thing. So the Copelands, kind of the name it and claim it kind of people. So I was naming and claiming it. I was praying. I was reading my Bible, taking those times, and I felt like God was kind of, if it wasn't like next day miracle, next day blessing, like it was in the vicinity of that time frame. And so I was like, that's what's up. Like, I'm seeking and seeking, I'm asking, I'm knocking, the door is opening, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, this is what's up. So, but of course there were disappointments, and I think over time, those disappointments kind of built up. I had a lot of disappointments that I think may have shaken me, but it wasn't until probably 2015 when one of my cousins passed. And I think that's what shook me. To the point that I was mad with God, but I knew I couldn't be mad with him, because like he's all powerful and he's all knowing and he's good. So clearly, like I didn't tell a lot of people, but my saying was kind of like, God is, I'm beefing with God, but he's never wrong. So it's kind of the beef is with myself. And, but in short, my cousin passed, and it was a relationship. We were not on good terms. And year after year, I would fast and I would pray for us to be, for reconciliation. And I just envisioned us being reconciled. for us, sitting on the porch, connecting, laughing one day. And I got a call on the way to work one day and found out that my cousin passed. And so it really shook me to my core. And I felt like that was the first time that I really felt like God, he mismanaged, he misplanned, he got it wrong this time. That's because I couldn't see the good on the other side of that. I couldn't see how he was going to make it work out. And so because I couldn't see it, I just felt like that was one of the times that he missed it. So that shook me.
Yeah. And I remember at your cousin's funeral being there and you being like, it seemed like you were in the daze.
Like 2016,
that
year, because he died at the end of in December of that year. So that next year was a blur. Like I honestly don't remember much from that year because I was in a daze. I was hurt. I stopped singing on the praise team at the church. Like I didn't. Funny enough, even though I stopped singing on the praise team at church, like he gave me songs, and so I still, I could hear him. I still was allowing those songs to minister to me, but I couldn't rock with him. Yeah.
What do you think you thought about God leading into that space?
The word says that God can. And so, like, I know he can do it. It's just like, does he want to? And I forget the scripture, but essentially it's kind of like, if it be his will. And so I know that he wants to heal us. I know that he wants to do good things for us and bless us. But I guess it was a disconnect in him wanting to do it, him being able to do it, and him not doing it. And because I've been praying for that relationship to be restored, you know how people say, I was praying and I was seeking God and they weren't consistent with it. They fell off. But I knew that was one thing that I really prayed for and I asked God for, I fasted for, I really sought God for it. And I just knew that was something that God would want, reconciliation. And so for him to die and me not to have it, I was just like, what? I just felt that was cruel, because I just didn't feel like I could grieve. I was grieving more than one thing. I was grieving the loss of my cousin, but I was grieving the loss of what I wanted, what I desired, what I had envisioned for us. And I felt like it was a godly vision, I felt like it was a godly dream. And so to have that not happen, it hurt. Yeah.
How did you cope at that time? Because I feel like we all cope in different ways. It may be overworking, overeating. It may be sex, drugs, and alcohol. It's a lot of different ways to cope. It doesn't have to look extreme, but how do you think you coped?
That's a good question. As I look back, I'm trying to think. I still was going to church. Even though do I remember the sermons? Do I remember? I remember going to church, and a church I was going to wasn't my parents' church at the time, and so they had a Kojic kind of feel. They weren't Kojic, they were non-denominational, but most of the members came out of Church of God in Christ, and so they would have praise breaks, and so normal people that do the praise breaks, I don't want a praise break right now. Don't touch me. Leave me alone. And so I'm there just out of more so routine. But really, I felt like my soul was crying out God, I need help. I need understanding. I need to figure this out. But there was one lady at church who still grabbed my hands. And she just was dancing with me. And I was like, girl, let me go. Don't touch me. But I'm looking back today, which I'm thankful for the 2020. I'm so glad she did that. I'm so glad that she wasn't moved by my face, my facial expressions, my countenance, because even though I may not have been able to see it then, like I needed that. I needed the love of God, you know? And so I still went to church. I probably ate a lot, but that's nothing out of the norm. I'm always eating. So I can't think of anything else other than maybe just kind of being in places, being present, but not being there mentally. So people didn't know to necessarily check on Mike because Mike is here. Mike is still working with the finance committee. Mike is still helping set up for church. Mike is still at this function, but I wasn't there though. And so it was just kind of like in a fog.
Mm-hmm. You're just in a routine and just going
Right.
Because, when you're a PK, I could probably count on two hands the number of times I missed a Sunday in my whole life.
You better than me, Lise.
Because it's just a part of routine. And so what you're saying is like it was routine, so you didn't stop going physically, but you stopped going mentally.
Yeah.
And it impacted your ability to trust God fully.
Yes.
The two of the chapters I have really center around trust. I guess every chapter it centers around trust, but two that come to mind in particular, power and protection. Mm-hmm. Do I trust that God will protect me from the harms and the suffering? And do I believe that God stewards his power well? Mm. Like there's a lot of things that he's in charge over, and I don't like the way he's steward his power in my life. Right. How have those two things been a challenge for you?
Definitely felt like God performed malpractice as it related to my cousin, as it related to job opportunities too. I remember there was a time when I was really looking, like really trying to, I feel like that's been kind of like the story of my life, always looking for employment and able to help other people get employment, fix their resume. Like it just wasn't hitting for me. So I would say the areas that have been hard for me were definitely employment, my finances, but definitely that situation with my cousin. It wounded me. And so even though I was upset with God, like if somebody came to me with a need, I would still pray. Like I knew God could do it. I was never, at no point did I feel like God can't.
You just wonder if he could do it for you.
If he would do it for me. And I realized it, like logically, like certain things that I saw him do, like that's the logic response. Like God, he showed up in this moment, like that's logical. Like when I look at it, that's logical and I can see it. But when I felt like he dropped the ball in that area, like I was like, what else? Honestly, that year afterwards, I felt like, well, what's to say that I won't die young too. My cousin died a year before. He was 29, so before his 30th. So there was only a year difference between us. And I couldn't see a lot of my future, like what was next. And so I was like, well, what if I'm supposed to die too? You know, what if God feels that he can get more glory from my death than from my life? And I wrestled with that. And I wrestled with that for a long time, not just the year after, but years after. I wrestled with, can God get enough glory from me while I'm living? Or, will I die prematurely? And so it was nothing blocking that idea because I saw it. Like I saw somebody die before they were 30, full of life. And so I don't know. I knew that God could, I just didn't feel like he was being mindful of me. So.
When you feel like he's not being mindful of you, how does that affect your prayer life and your reading Bible?
I feel like reading has always been a challenge. praying, I don't feel like praying is always a challenge. I feel like I've had enough uncertainties, definitely in the education space that I'm in. One thing my kids gonna do, my students are always gonna lead me to prayer. Okay, so I always pray. Because musically inclined, like I always listen to praise and worship music.
I'm musically inclined too.
Even in moments, Lisa, you're not gonna lie. Even in moments where I may not be going to the right places per se, I still got my worship music going. I'm gonna still worship regardless. And so, I definitely feel like I've had an increase in that. And I honestly this year was saying to myself, because I see where certain hindrances and challenges aren't those same challenges now. And I'm seeing where God is blessing me now. And honestly, had the idea of what does serving God look like in a place of blessing? Because if you ask me what I need to play during a struggle, during an issue, I can pull up a whole playlist for you. Whether you want CCM, whether you want gospel, I got you. And so, but I don't know if I've ever been in that space long, a blessing. And so I was wondering, like, will I be consistent when I don't need to necessarily go to him as much because it's not as tough? And I don't have to rob Paul to pay, rob any of the disciples to rob Peter to pay Paul. I got it. Like when I had the money in the bank, so I don't have to trust God for it. I got a good job, so I don't have to trust God per se for a good job. Like I have those things at my fingertip. I don't know would my reading be less? Would my prayer be less? Would my devotion be less in those moments? And maybe kind of saying to myself, well, maybe that's why I was in struggle so long, because maybe that's where I could stay consistent with him, So kind of trying to figure out what that would look like when when the things that I would seek him for, I don't necessarily have to seek him for now. So I pray. That's been consistent. I think maybe after the loss of my cousin, it was really touch and go. But outside of that, like I've always found a way to pray. So,
what would you tell younger Mike, the Mike that first got saved, the Mike that was zealous about God?
Just keep living. Just keep living. No.
Do you feel like you said a lot of stuff about God that you like? I said that in confidence, but now I would reframe that.
I think I'll be brutally honest with him. I think I was very rose-colored glasses. I don't think it's bad to be optimistic, but I think I was foolish to think my view of the world was different. And my parents, they had we were really sheltered from a lot. Power Rangers was the devil, like anything was the devil, so my parents cut like a lot of secular music, couldn't listen to secular music. So like having such a sheltered life, I was oblivious to what was ahead of me in the real world. And so I don't know, I just want to make sure that my younger self knew that it's going to be tough. Life is not fair. It's hard. It's difficult. But you have everything that you need, like God has put inside you, to be resilient, to bounce back, to bend and not break. Those would be the things that I would tell my younger self. Like, I know you have these dreams, and some of them may not. You probably should have written in pencil instead of pen. But I would just tell them, like, don't give up, though. I think that's been the biggest thing through every season is, like, Kara Shear got a song "Hang On" in there. It's like, hang, don't like hold on, because it does get better, and you in it. It looks like it's impossible, but on the other end of it, like on the other side of that, if you just give time. Like, you'll see what God is doing. You'll see what he was doing, what he was protecting you from, what he was shielding you from. And I would just want my younger self to know, like, he's got you regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, as I think about one of the chapters is peace. And I open up the chapter. You've read the intro of that chapter. We call that season of my life March Madness. It's an inside joke me and my friends have.
Okay.
And I just think about that time, that day. You were there that day, and as you,
I think it was madness for a lot of us. I think it was a moment for all of us.
yeah. And I remember just being so distraught. Everybody that was there was like, "We've never seen Lisa like that before." I think about that moment and my peace feeling like it was ripped from me, right? The peace I thought I had. What is a moment outside of the moment with your cousin that you felt like, this is a moment where my peace has been ripped from me?
So I talked through the pandemic, and which was very scary.
Because you were teaching over Zoom, right?
Yeah. So yeah and no. So I was teaching over Zoom, but I was also teaching kids in person. So there was a lot of uncertainty. Yes, certain leaders were in power and they were saying, certain things about this particular pandemic that it wasn't to be taken seriously. But a lot of the people, my timeline, of course, social media, was not following suit. And then those who were home, back home, because I did not live in Florida. I still lived in Dallas. And they told us to shelter in place. We were going on spring break. So spring break, kids were going home. We were sending them home with their laptops. And there was a lot of uncertainty. And they were like, shelter in place for like 2 months. Cool. I went to a friend's house and I was using their internet to, do some different documents because they still wanted us to send some stuff to the kids. And our friend said, so what's your plan? And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, we're supposed to be sheltering in place unless you're an essential worker. And it hit me. I was like, I have nowhere to go. I'm here essentially by myself. And so I didn't have, in Florida, you can go during hurricane season, you go home, you go to your parents' house or you shelter in place. And so I realized I didn't have anywhere to go to shelter in place for whatever is going on out there and getting people sick.
You just had to go, you would have to go home to your place by yourself.
Yeah. And so I remember my friend said I could stay at their home. And I remember riding back to my apartment to go grab some belongings so that I could shelter in place. And I remember crying because it hit me like I didn't have anybody. And I would say that's probably been one of the biggest moments where peace, I felt like robbed of my peace. Yeah.
In the moments, especially with COVID, so many of us had to wrestle with our peace being snatched on a different level. And another one of the chapters, I talk about purpose. When we think about the commercialization, got to get that word out, of purpose in our culture, with seeing people's social media feeds and seeing the highlight reel and then wondering, why am I here? Have you ever struggled with purpose as it relates to kind of navigating your disappointment with God?
So in middle school, a lot of kids were saying, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be this. They knew. And honestly, I I never had that place in middle school or high school where I just knew like what I wanted to do. In high school, my senior year, I came to First Coast and I joined the choir, and I found that was an avenue for me to go to college and get funding for college. And so I took that avenue, but after my first year as a classical voice major, I realized that was not what I was supposed to do. And
you should have came to me for tutoring. I could have helped you. I could have helped train you.
No, ma'am. And so at that point, like if the only thing I could see myself doing was singing, and I went through a semester and realized that that's not it. I didn't know what was next. What could I go to school for? What do I do? I changed my major so many times because I didn't have like that knowing on the inside, oh, I want to be this. And so I bounced around a lot. And that journey of me getting my degree in public administration of all things, I bounced around. Like I can see now that God had his hands on me and allowed me to be exposed to education because I was a teacher's aide and I worked for the YMCA in their after school program. But I could see now God was showing me what my purpose was. I just didn't know it then. And so now as a teacher, I never thought I was gonna be a teacher, at least. I just thought that it was a lot of pressure to be in charge of a young person's life. And I just felt like that was, I did not want to play with that. And, but here I am going on 7 years, and like I realized at the end of the 6th year that God wants me where I'm at right now is where I'm supposed to be. And just like that, knowing that the kids had in middle school, I want to be this, like I know now, like I'm where he wants me to be, shaping young minds, so.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. I say about purpose because I think we put a lot of weight on it. Purpose is not what we do, but it's who we are, who we become. And I think even in you being a teacher, even in all of the experience, God was forming you.
Yeah.
And so that's really dope to see how God has formed and shaped you through using teaching to do that. Because I mean, I don't have patience to teach middle schoolers.
My God.
I think it takes a whole lot of patience to teach students, period. I would have to teach college, but to teach elementary, middle, high school, that takes a level of patience. And I always think about the character development that comes by being a teacher, the patience, the long suffering that has to come for you to tell a student over and over again.
Why certain things didn't work out the way I wanted to, and why I did have to wait, and why sometimes it didn't happen. And when it doesn't happen the way you want to, what is your response? Like, how are you going to operate because things didn't work out the way you wanted them to? Because I feel like those lessons, I'm now able to teach my students. Yeah, I teach history, but I also teach a lot of social emotional learning. I teach a lot of things that may not be on a standardized test, but you're going to need in life. And knowing how to fail, not get what you want, those are things, being patient, those are things that you need.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. This has been a rich interview. If you all have wrestled like Mike has and like I have, I think this is the perfect resource for you. When faith disappoints, the gap between what we believe and what we experience, and it's available wherever books are sold. Thank you, Mike, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Jude 3 Project podcast. You can catch all our past episodes at jude3project.org. You can donate at jude3project.org by hitting the donate tab. Remember, here at Jude 3, we're helping you know what you believe and why you believe it. Until next time, grace and peace, and God bless. Many of you know about my faith crisis I had when I was an undergrad student at the University of North Florida, but many of you don't know about the wrestle I had when I was a seminary student. I had heard about kids being murdered by terrorists in the Middle East. It struck me. I was grappling with that thing, and we were learning about the problem of evil in class, but it just didn't emotionally satisfy me, if I'm honest. I could explain the problem theologically, philosophically, logically, but emotionally, it just didn't hit. And I was wrestling with the Lord. So I went to my New Testament professor and I said, "Hey, Dr. Purser, I'm wrestling with this." And he said, "Me too." That was the answer I needed, to know somebody that has spent all this time in school, has walked with the Lord this many years, could still wrestle with his faith, and it was okay. He normalized the struggle for me. In my debut book, When Faith Disappoints, I want to give you what Dr. Purser gave me, the understanding that it's okay to wrestle. In this book, When Faith Disappoints, the gap between what we believe and what we experience, we explore the pain points that cause people to wrestle with faith. Personhood. Who am I? Power. You've given God control of your life, but you don't like the direction he's steered you. Protection. Why didn't God protect you as a child, as an adult? In so many cases, you feel unprotected. Provision. We know scripture says that God will supply all of our needs, but sometimes you feel like you still don't have what you need. Purpose. Why am I on this earth? Pleasure. It seems like you're sacrificing so much as a Christian and the return doesn't meet what you hoped it would. You don't have joy. You don't have happiness. And the one that has gripped us so much post-COVID, peace. Anxiety seems to be more of a companion to you than peace. I know the wrestle. And many of you are in the gap between what you believe and what you experience. And I hope this book will be a balm to help bridge that gap, because many of you are struggling with disappointment. In the midst of disappointment, I hope these words will provide hope. Grab When Faith Disappoints. Available now wherever books are sold.